Welcome to Code Man's Auto. I got a 2019 Chevrolet Silverado, and let me show you what we're getting into today. We've got a Schaeffler LUK torque-on torque converter, and here's the part number. TC0017. This torque converter is going into a 6L80 transmission in a 2019 Silverado. One thing I want to let you know first is we have already replaced the front seal and we have replaced the torque converter O-ring. Make sure that you replace this O-ring if you are replacing your torque converter. This torque converter looks completely different from the factory torque converter. I don't know if it comes with new bolts, but there is new bolts in the box. You may want to look at that if you go to purchase one of these torque converters. I'm going to have links to this torque converter in my description below. If you're on your cell phone, hit the more and it will drop you down into the links and show you how much this torque converter is. I'm going to set this torque converter out on the bench and we're going to take a look at it side by side with the original torque converter that came out of this vehicle. Okay, so right off we can see that this torque converter is going to have a lot less volume of fluid. I don't know, you might want to go with a deep pan on this torque converter. If you was to use this, I'll leave a link below for a deep pan for a 6L80 so that you would have that option. But just looking at the two, you're going to lose some volume of fluid. Your transmission is not going to hold as much fluid as it did with the original torque converter. Okay, so you can always tell if your torque converter has been changed. Let's flip these two torque converters over. You can tell that the bottom of the torque converter or the back of the torque converter is completely different. Okay, so one interesting thing is you don't have to worry about the welds on the bolt pads because the bolt pads are on plate. So that's a good thing for this torque converter. So coming into the manufacturer's torque converter, you can see how big and bulky the pilot is that sits back into the crank. And when you come over to this new converter, you can see that it does not go all the way to the torque converter. Make sure you watch this video to where we are putting the torque converter back against the engine so that you'll know how to do that and you won't destroy the pilot on your new torque converter. Okay, so those are the visible differences between the two converters that I can see. Like I said, my biggest concern is just the fact of the volume of fluid. These transmissions stay hot anyway and they need all the fluid that they can get. I just feel like that if you're going to use a torque converter like this, I'm going to recommend to this customer that if we're going to use a torque converter like this, he might think about getting him a deeper pan later on so that there'll be enough transmission fluid rotating to keep it cool. Like if he's on a hot day going down the interstate, you know, pulling a trailer or something like that, he will want to make sure that he has enough volume of fluid to keep the transmission cool. This torque converter has a lot of good reviews on it, and I'm excited about getting it put in there and seeing what we come up with. So we've got a good look at a torque converter. Now let's get it seated back into the transmission. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put just a little bit of assembly goo, just a light film on the neck of that so it'll go back into the bushing and the seal without hurting or damaging anything. Okay, then what I'm going to do is pour just a little bit of transmission fluid down into the converter. The fluid that we're going to be using will be Mobil 1 synthetic LV ATF HP. I'm not going to put too much, maybe about a pint, and then I'm going to let it drain down into the converter. What you're trying to do is soak any bearings that's down in there, or maybe soak the clutch. You want to get some fluid down in there just to make sure that all that has a little bit of fluid on it before you crank that engine over. Then what I want to show you that you're trying to line up is you have to spline this into the converter. You have to spline this into the converter, and then back in here you have pump gears that you have to line up, and the pump gears go right here. This is what your pump gear looks like inside of the transmission. and it splines just like that. You can see I had a little bit of a time lining it up, even just out here on the bench. So, but what I'm going to do is shoot measurements on the back of this transmission and this torque converter across the bell housing, and give you the measurements you're going to need to get this installed without damaging anything. It's also a good idea to add a little assembly goo right there on that seal. That'll make it go in, that'll make the torque converter slide in just a little better. Now what you'll do is you will hold the pilot and you will turn the converter as you go back with it. I put on a pair of gloves because if your hand slips off here and hits this, it will cut you. So you do what you want to do there, but I'm wearing gloves. So I just felt to go back into all the splines it needs to go into. Now what we are going to go over is the lockup seal. And when I push on it, you hear that. Let's do it one more time. So I'm in all the splines I need to be, and when I push on it, you hear that. That means you're all the way back. Okay, so we're going to run a straight edge across here. We're going to get a measurement to this boat pad, and we're going to get a measurement to this pilot. We're not going to call out the measurement, but you can look at it and see if you got the same measurement when you go to install your torque converter. Make sure, if you are watching this video on how to seat your torque converter, make sure that you're using a Schaeffler LUK torque-on torque converter. This video is not for seating a torque converter that is a billet converter or a different style torque converter. Okay, so I've got my straight edge crossed, and there is the measurement. And we're going to move in here to the pilot, and that shows you the measurement to the pilot. If you got those measurements, you should be good to go and ready to install this Schaeffler torque converter. Alright, now we're going to put a little bit of lube guard on the pilot so that it'll slide back into the crank. Okay, so with the torque converter all the way back, what you'll want to do is make sure that the dowel pins, you've got 2 dowel pins, make sure that they are both in the engine. I'm going to walk over here and show you where they should be. So you'll look up here, this is where one of your dowel pins goes, and on the other side is where the other dowel pin goes. Now those dowel pins are important because if the dowel pins are missing, then the transmission could slide down a little bit and your pilot would be kind of jammed up. Your boats would not be centered, nothing would be centered, and you would wear out your bushing in your transmission because your transmission would drop down a little bit, and if one of them was missing, it would drop down on one side a little bit, and that pilot being in here and bolted up to the flywheel or flex plate, then it would wear on the pump bushing and destroy your bushing, and you'll start leaking transmission fluid. So just make sure both your dowel pins are in there. Okay, so you come up underneath of the truck. Cody has already got the bell housing all bolted up against the engine, and what we're going to do now is show the clearance that you should have on the torque converter. Okay, so looking up at the flex plate, you will see how easily that I'm turning the torque converter. I'm just moving it with one finger, and you can see how easily I can turn the torque converter, and you can also see how much clearance there is between the flex plate and the torque converter. First thing you want to do is pull out this little cover. Okay, looking up at my torque converter boat, I ran the converter around until it lined up with the flex plate torque converter boat hole. I went ahead and put my torque converter boat in, but it's loose. You can see that I'm turning it. So it's loose. And now what I'm going to do is come down to this hole where I had you to take that cover off. And what you're going to do is just stick a screwdriver up in there. And what you will watch is I am going to move the torque converter back against the flex plate, just like that. Now you can put your torque converter bolts in. You'll probably have to turn the flex plate put all 3 torque converter bolts in and not tighten them all the way up, leave them a little bit loose, and then go back around and finish torquing them down. Okay, when I was talking about a deep pan for the 6L80, this is what I was talking about. You can see the depth difference between the stock pan and the aftermarket deep pan. You can see there's a lot of depth difference. The good thing about having the deep pan is just having more volume of transmission fluid, and that's what you would need with this torque converter that is smaller, that is a lot smaller than the original stock converter. You're just going to drop the volume of transmission fluid, the amount of transmission fluid that you have in the transmission. You're just going to drop it down a quart or two, and that's not good. You should really go with a deep pan if you're going to go with the Schaeffler TorqueCon torque converter. Okay, so one more thing I like about the LUK torque converter is it is brand new. You don't have to fool with a core charge sending your old torque converter back. That's a big bonus. We got this torque converter installed. The customer purchased this torque converter. They called me back and they said that they really appreciated the work that we've done and us installing the torque converter for them. And what I'd like for you to do, if you've used a LUK torque converter, go to the comments, leave a comment of your experience with the LUK torque converter. All right, guys, this is Codeman's Auto. Please like and please subscribe.